Anyway, we discussed last meeting dam ownership, and I think it's been fairly established through the information we've received so far that the ownership of the dam right now is the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. Would we all agree with that? That takes care of that issue. So, although it could change. We also, I know the staff from the Park District and the city attacked and I think basically finished the River Task Force website questions section. Have any of you got any comments on that or suggestions?
Oh, I thought it was well done. Oh. I thought it was well done.
Okay.
Hopefully people submit some more questions. Or...
Does everyone out there know that we have the website and then we have the... Okay.
Some people shook their heads. If you just Google it, it'll pop up in the first couple of searches.
Google, under what?
St. Charles Dam Task Force.
Is it on the city website?
Yes. The St. Charles Dam Task Force, DAM. Sometimes you want to spell it a little differently, but you know. All right. Next, kind of an action item here. We're going to have the subcommittee reports from the 4 subcommittees that we established a while back. I expect each of the committees to give a short presentation of what they've discovered so far, what, you know, if they have any action items, things that they want to talk about or relate to the rest of the board. And they don't need to be definitively final at this point. They're just, well, we'll just see where you're all at. So we'll start with the environmental with Bob Thompson and Conrad.
You got it. All right. Can you all hear me? Okay. So you all have copies of this in front of you. It's titled the St. Charles Dam Task Force Environmental Subcommittee by Newell and Thompson, June of 2024. So we scoped 5 areas of exploration that we currently feel we need additional information on, and that we will be going through primary literature, talking to agencies, getting any data from any source that we can to help understand more. Those topics are stormwater pollution levels, pollutants and sediments behind the dam along the shoreline, fish assemblages before and below the dam, invasive species presence below the dam, and human health impacts of water behind the dam current form. We are requesting the following resources from the task force: a stormwater discharge monitoring program. Doesn't have to be long, but I think if we can at least get 3-4 months worth of data, that will help us understand what the pollution situation is around St. Charles and the Fox River. List of stormwater and wastewater outfalls upriver of the dam, sediment sampling and testing for contaminants above the dam and below the dam, and water quality testing, so that's the actual body of water, not just the stormwater, but water quality testing in front of and behind the dam. So we're looking for some chemistry research if I can help scope that or what the process is going to be about acquiring those resources. I'm happy to help scope that RFI or RFP. We also...
Can I stop for a second?
Yep.
I have a question on that. When you talk about stormwater discharge monitoring, that's fine in terms of volume and things like that, but I'm not sure, you're talking about the quality of water?
The current contaminant levels, yes.
Okay. So we're doing that for what reason? How will that be changed by the presence or the absence of the dam?
So that that's a great question. So we received a few questions and comments about how removing the dam is the best method of reducing pollution, improving habitat quality in the Fox River. And according to the studies that I read from the U.S. EPA and DNR and the Illinois EPA, the primary vector for poor habitat quality in the Fox River is poor water quality resulting from heavy metals such as mercury, cadmium, lead, arsenic, PCBs, and I think PFAS was also in EPA's report. And they indicated that all of those were coming from stormwater. So if we're going to help the public understand what the actual environmental impacts of having the dam versus not having the dam, we also need to identify what the real causes of habitat degradation are.
Okay. And then how are we going to how are we gonna correlate that with the presence or absence of the dam?
Well, if we look at the water quality parameters that is in the water right now, we can look to see, so if we know, for example, what the levels of mercury are in the Fox River, then we look at what the levels coming out of the outfall just down the street on a given storm. Then we can know that, well, if the levels coming out of the stormwater are significantly lower than what is in the pool right now, if the dam were to be removed, we could assume, potentially, that the mercury levels would go down and the amount of whatever contaminant coming from the stormwater would not rise to the same historic level. But if they are at or above the levels currently in the pool, then removing the dam would actually not reduce the overall contaminant load in the Fox River.
Mm-hmm. So, and I guess the other thing is, you have to pardon my ignorance in all this, but it would seem to me that all that would establish would be, if the dam were removed, there would probably, if they're coming from the discharge, it would probably be the same level, but it would move by St. Charles faster going downstream.
Depending on the contaminant.
Okay.
Some are really great at bioretention, some get into the sediment immediately, others, yeah, they are in the water column and very easily pushed past. And yeah, I mean, to a point, what we generate affects Geneva, Aurora, et cetera, what Elgin and whoever else above, comes down.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a point or question. In the Corps of Engineers report, they said they did tests for for the hazardous materials in the sediment and didn't find any of note.
Yeah, I tried to get their metadata. It doesn't exist.
Well, their metadata, I mean, doesn't exist on a number of things, but I'm just saying that the U.S. Corps of Engineers report, which is the recommendation for removal of the dams, says that they looked at all the sediment and did not find, any contaminants that were noteworthy.
My understanding, talking to the Corps, is that they did not do their own study. They are referencing Illinois EPA studies and local studies, which have not actually done core samples of the sediment.
Well, yeah, I don't have the report here in front of me, but to me, it was fairly clear that they had hired an engineer to do that, or a testing firm.
They've got 2 paragraphs on water quality, and they say that there's no impacts to water quality, and it's all of 2 paragraphs.
Okay, so what we can do is you can look into that one outside the meeting, rather than take up time now.
Yep.
And then we answered.
Wait a second.
Oh, I just had a question, Conrad, and Bob, this report is very thorough, or the start of it. Question in regards to the invasive species, you talk about below the dam. Why wouldn't we measure the level of the invasive species above the dam?
We certainly could. Again, this is just preliminary. My original thought in reading through all the primary literature is folks have identified the presence of Asian carp below the dam,
Okay.
and their ability to move upstream as the dams are removed. But if there are invasive species above the dam, we should definitely know that as well.
I don't know. I don't have that measure, but it seems like
point.
it'd be a good, since we're already looking at the fish assemblies.
Okay. Go ahead now, thanks.
And then we answered 4 questions from the public. 3 were directed directly at the environmental subcommittee. 1 was not, and I think I grabbed it from somebody else because it was environmental focused. Yes, that would be number 4, indicating that removal of the dam is the most cost-effective way to improve the quality of the Fox River, and that's where I indicated that multiple agencies have actually identified stormwater and poor water quality as being the primary adverse effect to the river system and not dam.
Would you want to go over those questions? I don't know that.
I was going to ask this, are we putting the public comments on the website, responses to them?
Holly can answer this one?
Oh,
Sure.
At this time, they have not gone on the website. There's one function that they're still working on the website, but the idea is once they collectively have gone before the task force and they decide that that can be an appropriate FAQ, we can add it onto the FAQ, comments and answers.
Okay, that's fine. But for the benefit of the people in the audience now, why don't you briefly go through?
Go through them real quick? Okay, so number 1, I've got the question numbers, the date received, question content, and the response. First question, how will the exposed former river bottom be tested for old industrial toxins, and if they are found, how will that be abated, meaning who will be in charge of organizing all that and also paying for it? The response is there are currently no proposed plan for testing or mitigating sediments behind the dam. It is not included in the Army Corps of Engineers or Illinois DNR plan. This would indicate that it would likely be up to the city to either test and or mitigate or litigate the agencies. Number two, is anyone doing a before and after study of flora and fauna at Carpenterville? As you know, their dam is scheduled to be removed shortly. Did we start a study before, a before study in St. Charles in the case the dam comes out? Our response to that question is it was a requirement of the Army Corps of Engineers plan in Carpentersville. Illinois DNR was designated as the responsible agency for that study. We've been unable to find any such study or report as of yet. The Park District is currently working on a report of species observed by staff above and below the dam. However, this will primarily be qualitative and not quantitative in nature. Third question, is it currently recommended to eat anything that comes out from the Fox River in St. Charles? Answering that question would require a medical doctor in order to make a recommendation. So we're not recommending anything or against. However, the EPA identified the consumption of fish in the Fox River as impaired due to heavy metal toxins, PFAS, and rubber. Again, those are typically the elements that you find in contaminated stormwater. PFAS, by the way, is, think of Teflon, like your frying pans. The removal of the dam would not reduce or eliminate these toxins as they are continuously discharged into the river via stormwater discharge. The fourth question, the removal of the dam on the Fox is part of a plan to improve significantly the quality of the Illinois River Basin. Removal is the most cost-effective way to do this. If STC does not opt to remove the dam, what are the additional costs, if any, to our city to ensure that we have done our part to promote significant improvements? For example, will we be required to dredge the impoundment periodically, install fish ladders, etc.? Also, will the taxpayers be required to foot the bill for ongoing maintenance of an aging and dangerous dam? So I grabbed that just for the first part of it. The footing the bill and such, I have no information on. The response was removal of the dam is not the most cost-effective way to improve the quality of the Illinois River Basin. Primary factor depressing the ecological health of the basin is primarily due to the discharge of untreated stormwater and wastewater, according to the EPA. Removal of the dam would not address this issue, and costs to address it would be ongoing post-dam removal.
So where do you guys anticipate going from here?
Talking to you about the resources needed
Okay.
to further expand on the topics of exploration that we'd like to go down. My intention is to keep just a running tally of all of these questions from the public, just kind of adding them onto the table, giving them additional numbers.
And addressing them when they come up.
And addressing them as they come up. And if we want to look back at historical questions, we can do that as well.
Okay, perfect.
How do we validate these answers before they get published?
That is actually what I was hoping to talk about with the rest of the group. So I am citing academic or agency papers and studies, but the city council members, I was actually hoping to get your input on whether or not you wanted us to create a running reference sheet, annotated with individual identifiers, and then we can take those numbers and put them on the responses in a super or subtext for future consideration if you want to go back and check our work or see where it is that we pulled information from. You guys are the decision makers, so I don't know if that would be helpful or not, or it's just...
Well, I think it would be helpful to have some reference as to where the source of these, of this information is coming.
Currently it lives in a folder on my laptop, but I'm happy to create an annotated reference list.
Okay. What is the rest of it? Yes?
Just to answer Conrad's question, I think it's important to cite the source, the qualifications of the source. So if you can do that, that would be great.
Yeah, we'll start referencing the agency documents.
Let me make one quick comment if I could. Conrad and I were talking about this. it is probably good for the rest of the reports that we have going forward, that we would label them kind of like they did here, Storm Task Force, Environmental Subcommittee with your names underneath it. Okay? Everybody got that? Perfect. Yes.
All right, so just the question as to whether you could add one more topic of focus. And so as a recreational user, I call it weeds, but I think the technical term is benthic algae. So the long, stringy plant material that grows in the river. So just looking at kind of causes of that and what effects removal of the dam would have. Because just observation as a river user, I noticed that where the impoundment ends is generally where a lot of that benthic algae starts to really grow.
Macro and micro?
I'm going to say it's macro because I can see it, right? It's the long stringy stuff that gets caught in rudders and propellers and things.
Okay. Assemblage or just overall load?
You're kind of beyond me.
Okay. Do you want to know the types or do you want to know the overall density?
Generally
we want the
overall
genus
density.
and species. Just kidding. I don't think we have to get too far down the hole, you know, but
And then along similar lines, the total phosphorus contribution from wastewater treatment upstream. Because from some of the bit that I've been reading, a lot of that algae is coming from total phosphorus.
Yeah. That data we actually do have because those folks, the wastewater treatment plants do have a NIFTY's permit.
Perfect.
And so they have to actually disclose what they're discharging.
Got it. Okay, so your topics of exploration are things that you
We
don't know.
don't know, but I can grab that data and we can have that presented. It's just the stormwater stuff. None, of the exception of Aurora, none of the municipalities are even monitoring their stormwater because they're below 50,000 people. So we have no clue what's going into the water.
Thank you.
okay. Next, economic impact.
Jim, can I ask a question? So if I can put our city council hat on for a second, and I'm not saying that this isn't true, Conrad, but so are we establishing right now that this response to this fourth question is agreed upon by this task force, that this is 100% accurate, that the removal of the dam is not the most cost-effective way, you know, going through all of that? I just want to make it clear that as we start going down some of these points and taking in this information, that this is an acceptance of fact, and there's not somebody up here who's like, well, hang on a second, I'm not sure that's 100% accurate.
The trouble is that the person asked a absolute question, and answering that in a way that's not an absolute answer is really difficult.
But I don't think that's wrong to say we don't know.
Sure.
You know, and that this is a subject of debate, or that there's different viewpoints. You know, for example, cost is not necessarily cost. Cost is net of, you know, if there's a potential for economic development along the river or uses of the river, et cetera, that, and I'm just giving that as an example. There's other questions too about, you know, where there's differences in the answers that Conrad and his subcommittee have done versus what the Corps of Engineers report said. And I think we should point those out, you know, and if we say the Illinois EPA says this, but the Army Corps of Engineers says this, that should be listed as a fact, you know, in some way, so that the public can know that it's not a, you know, 100% this or 100% that.
I completely agree. And it's more about making sure that I'm certainly not an environmental expert in any capacity. The removal of the dam would not reduce or eliminate these toxins as they're continuously discharged into the river stormwater trench. That makes sense, but is somebody backing that up who is, you know, certified, credentialed, met, or are we all accepting that, yes, we agree that that is fact? So there's not somebody that's going to come out and say, I disagree with that assessment.
Well, someone can always do that if they want to, and I'd entertain that discussion. But I guess in this end, going with what one report we have so far, I would suggest that the report is given tonight. If you as members of the task force have, and he's going to annotate his sources so you can look at those. But if you have concerns that there's something in the Army Corps report that differs from what they're providing, have that prepared for the next meeting, and we can discuss it at that time.
Yep.
So, I don't know that anybody's saying these things are going to be, these are definitive answers. I mean, we're not making conclusions really, we're just kind of throwing it out there at this point, so. But we will at some point, so, all right, having said that, anything else?
On that report?
What's that?
On that report?
Yes. I haven't gotten to B yet.
Okay.
I'm about to go to B right now. Okay, the economic impact report. Where are my economic impactors?
You want to go?
What's that?
No? You don't want to go? So I'm not sure why ours didn't get printed, so I'll just read them and we'll resend them out. Are they in the packet? No?
I don't think so.
I think yours was in the packet, I remember reading that.
I have a copy, but I didn't see it.
What does it look like? There's not one labeled that says.
It's broken into five sections.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. All right, good.
Do I have it?
It's in your packet on your,
Not in my
It's on
packet.
here. If you go on the computer, might have been, it's on here.
it's on there?
Yeah, that was
Which number is it?
Well,
4.
I have a copy, so I'm good, but
Number 4.
I was just making sure that they were in there.
I don't think the public has it unless they happen to look at the website though for.
No, I was more worried about you guys, not that I'm not worried about you, I'm just making sure that they had a copy. So it didn't seem like I was reading and they were like, what are you saying? So Brian and I started the question of economic impact. We broke this very complicated question into 5 different sections. The first one we have is general use. And again, forgive me, I'm going to be reading off and trying to have this conversation. So we pose this as questions that we want to continue to pursue of, whether we need to specifically bring in a third party or we can continue to work with the resources that we have. But these 5 areas are broken into general use, existing dam, park district, private interest, and of course, City Hall. So for general use in terms of economic impact considerations or questions, the first is, what is the economic impact of the remaining viable usage? So if the dam is removed and what's left, what economic use of the river is viable? So we have fishing, kayaking, things like that. The next question is, what is the average property value for river adjacent properties at this moment right now? So as we're collecting that data and working through city support, we're pretty close to being able to say, here is a good idea of what the current value is. What is the estimated value of that property thanks to the river? So if I still, own a piece of property that is adjacent to the river and the river goes away, well, I still own the property, how is that going to be in flux? We asked this question before, and we think we have the answer to it, but we're still pursuing. But is there any sort of white paper or comparable economic study by other communities in terms of, when they're measuring the impact financially, economically, that a river, a dam brings to that community? There are some other studies that we found that we're cautious to referencing because they're not, it's Colorado, it's some of these other communities. We want to make sure that we try and stay closer to, Midwest, Chicago, Illinois. The second area, the existing dams. So we've asked this question, but we want to get a confirmed answer that we all agree upon or accept that, as fact. What is the current maintenance cost for the dam annually? And then being able to project that moving forward if it is to stay in place. Do we anticipate any significant increases to the cost if the city inherits the ownership? So if the decision is to keep the dam, we own it, all of a sudden we, can expect what type of jump in pricing, et cetera. What is the projected life cycle of the dam so that we can start building that into our public works budget, what we need to anticipate? Another question is, what additional staffing resources, et cetera, do we have to have dedicated to now inheriting and owning that? So for the existing dam, what is the cost structure, economic impact of now owning this where, we've been able to push that ownership to somebody else other than the city? Park district? So from again, trying to look at this economically, or the contribution financially, economically, et cetera. Can the paddle boats continue without the dam? It's one of the questions, that we've gotten most about this. And how much revenue, how much economic activity is directly tied to that. So if you don't have the paddle boats, you know, what is that impact to the park district and the, you know, surrounding businesses? How many activities, programs currently utilize the river? So to give you an example, if you know, we have, we've got 20 programs that leverage the river in some capacity, and registration for that is X dollar amount, and we typically have 500 participants a year. You can do the math of, you know, that's going to be a drop of X to the park district that won't be there if, you know, water levels change, et cetera. So, one that's personal to me, how many people currently utilize the golf course? And the impact of if the dam is changed, right? If the water levels change, whatever, what will the impact be to the park district and to the golf course and to the use? And, you know, will there be additional maintenance? Will there be expansion? You know, and these are questions that we want to pose to ultimately the park district to help from an economic standpoint of what that might mean, good or bad, one way or the other. And then our last one, which is, this is Brian's favorite. I'm just kidding. Will the park district consider taking ownership of the dam?
I can answer that now.
So, from an economic, you know, from an economic impact standpoint, those were the 5 trying to start out specifically to the park district if we could help get more answers to. Private interest, this is actually where it gets, as if the first 3 areas were not challenging, this is where it gets really sticky. How many people visit or leverage the river in some capacity each year? And what is the corresponding economic impact to those people who visit the river? So, you know, we're working with the Business Alliance, having conversations about how we can start extracting and utilizing some of that data to give forecasts. But if you've got X number of thousands of people who specifically visit St. Charles to leverage the river in some capacity, the logic there is then they, you know, they eat a meal, they might stay in a hotel, they use gas stations, et cetera. Well, if that number drops, so too will your economic impact. So starting first off with how many people, or what is our projected number of people who specifically come to visit this community because of the river? How many businesses directly leverage the river for daily operations? One of the questions or comments we got was, you know, define directly leverage. And we try to make the scope of this question. So if you're somebody who has invested in outdoor dining, you know, next to the river, logically you would be impacted by that. So if the river were to change in some capacity, you know, how many businesses would actually be able to say, yes, this directly could impact me, and having an idea of, for that community downtown, and then expanding out for the rest of the city of how many of those people would self-identify quickly of, yes, I will be impacted. Downtown, I hesitate because downtown corridor financial value, the financial value variance over the last 25 years. I know that's a mouthful, but trying to look at how this particular footprint in our community has changed in value over the last 2 decades. And if you remove the river, change the concept of, or you remove the dam, you change the concept of the river is, you know, how does that change the investment that's been put down into this space? Or how does it change moving forward what types of projects or construction or development ultimately are to follow? We currently have, and everybody can see this on the city site, but we currently have projects underway. We've had some, you know, concepts that have started to come. Do those halt? Do you stop? How long? You know, does it change the focus of, you know, what that valuation is and what we might expect in the next 2 to 3 years as we figure this question out? So, and then last but not least, from an economic consideration for City Hall, probably why Brian and I got tasked with this. We spent a great deal of time working with our Director of Finance. So can the city afford financially to take ownership of the dam? Can we find a way, if that is a path to pay for this, take ownership and do that? So that's first and foremost. What are the projected budget impacts to City Council for the next, you know, X amount of years? Is there an opinion by the St. Charles Business Alliance on the role the river plays, the dam, et cetera, and its economic impact, attracting businesses, retaining businesses, you know, foot traffic to the city, et cetera? So, you know, getting an opinion of that group to help us as we make a decision moving forward. Mentioned this earlier, but specifically, so will the city need to hire new personnel specifically to oversee, you know, dam safety, operations, maintenance, et cetera? And then last but not least, can our economic director provide a tax revenue forecast with or without the dam so that, you know, this city can actually have a black and white forecast of what that might look like? So our immediate question is some of these are going to take a lot of time because as we're gathering data and what realistically this task force is comfortable, what direction we're comfortable moving forward with, because some of these, in fairness, are going to take a lot of time and probably a lot of resources to go and get. So whether it's bringing in a third party, we've talked a lot with Derek Conley, who's our Economic Development Director at City Hall. Obviously, some of these questions we can start with our colleagues in Park District, but somebody who's in strategic planning, consulting, et cetera, like some of these questions take 6 months, you know. So what direction do we want to start to try and get agreeable or at least acceptable starting points for data?
Are you asking me?
I have some comment.
I just put it out there.
The city did an economic study back a few years ago, and it talked about real estate value, appreciation, et cetera, and also some sales tax questions. That existed, but it was mostly tax orientated, not value.
It felt like it would be, given the current market, given how much has changed, we thought that it would be more appropriate with a question how big the dam's role with or without to go and get updated data.
Yeah, I think but it would give you the parameters, I think, of what they looked at. That was a consulting firm was hired by the city to conduct that.
I think it's important that we don't want to keep going back to, well, there was a study in 2017 and accepting that as the data point moving forward to say, if we do that, then what's the point of the task force?
Yeah, there is a list of other cities who have done dam projects, both Midwestern and Western and other states. Every project, of course, is different in scope, but there is those lists, and somebody like Derek could contact their appropriate economic development team from that particular city. Yeah. You know, we took a group of 20 down to Greenville, South Carolina, and spent all day with their team, the mayor, et cetera.
And we're well aware of that. I think there's I chime in so I'm not the only one who's talking, but there is I'll say a caution of wanting to, again, not lean on studies that are, you know, X amount of years old, or feeling like I want to make sure that we are using comparable communities, spaces at as much, you know, with also not putting too much level, say, on a Yorkville, right?
Well, there's probably 40 or 50 projects there. And so some of those are going to be closer than others, but certainly we can give that list to you or to Derek and have him go forward. One of the things that was not mentioned on your report was there's also a lot of infrastructure that's not necessarily part of the dam. Like the Riverwalk over here, I mean, if the river were to shrink in width, and if the pool impoundment goes away, then what happens to a crumbling river wall, and what do you put, you know, is it just going to be mud flats, or is it going to be some kind of vegetation? Is it going to be some other kinds of natural materials? Those are all additional costs that if the dam is gone, you know, the Corps, as my understanding, has not said anything about any of that stuff. They're willing to pay their estimated cost of dam removal, but they make no mention of all the other infrastructure pieces that are part of that question. And just one final one is that there are people that do nothing but those kind of economic and environmental impact things. And other cities have hired them. Some are located here in Chicago. I have no idea what the cost is, but if we feel that's valid, they can do those studies and do them quickly if they're available.
Ryan, thanks for doing that. I think the question for me is who is qualified to answer many of these questions on there, if they're economic questions. I continue to lean towards somebody with the expertise in this field, whether it's a consultant, for example, the paddle boats, can they continue to operate if the dam is removed? In order to have that answer, I think it would go back to maybe a hydrologist. Well, how far down will the water drop to answer that question? So we couldn't even get an answer to this until you do the other one first. So for me, I'm just throwing it out there for myself. I think I lean towards getting some sort of consultant or professional to answer a lot of these questions. I think some of them can be answered through, are pretty basic, like the paddle boats, how much revenue do you generate annually? I think those are pretty straightforward, but that's kind of where I'm going with this.
I guess my comment would be this. I'm not opposed to the concept, but, some of these get quite specific, and they're also talking about projections, and, I don't know. I question how deep we have to get into some of these things. Do we really need to hire a consultant that's going to, look at it for over a 6-month time period or something like that? It's either going to impact us or not. When I say us, a particular issue, I should say. How do I want to say this? Well, for example, when we look at the private interest and even the city interest, we talk about the economic impact. That's important, but I think if we have a general idea as to what that's going to be, I don't think we have to have it be that very specific. Down to projections of this happens, that happens. Basically, if we can see that there's going to make there's a substantial either positive or negative impact, of a certain magnitude, that should be sufficient. I don't know that we have to have it down to a real minute,
That might help answer the question of what is the net gain or loss if the dam comes out and the city loses revenue, the dam stays and the city takes ownership, and that maintains or increases property values. And there's an equation that I think you have to kind of balance, and some of these questions will go to help answer that equation.
Correct. But we're talking about the concept of those questions and some specifics, but I don't know that we need to get that specific in terms of, like you're talking.
I think, I agree with you. We may not need to get specific on some of these, because if we have a hydrologist that comes in and says, listen, the dam will drop, the water level will drop by, I'm just making this up, by 50%, and then therefore, well, you can't operate kayaks or the paddle boats or this or that or whatever, you probably don't even need to do the work on here. We already have the answer, right? Because I can't answer the question. If they come back and say, well, it'll drop by 5%, will these things still operate then? So I think there's an assumption being made. Will these things we don't even know if some will or will not be able to function. And I need, for me personally, I need somebody that is experienced in this, that has the qualifications to provide a general guide on what will be impacted on this list if the dam is removed. And that's based really on the water level, right? So if the water level goes down, I think we can probably even answer some of these ourselves, because they won't have to be answered. We'll know that answer, but that's just my opinion.
Well, and so there's this, what is the impact for the contribution of the Fox River and the dam to the overall, let's call it the health and wellness of the city of St. Charles? And why that question matters from a city council perspective of, if you followed, the last few years and the amount of projects and things that we have going on with Public Works and Finance Department, and there's this, escalation of work that we're trying to get caught up on, et cetera. But then all of a sudden, if you have a forecasted or a significant drop because that changes, understanding from a council's perspective of these things that we thought we might have to invest in and do or prepare for might be changing dramatically in the years to come. you're unlikely to get a, 99% accuracy on this number because some of these questions are so complex. But to say, well, yes, if you leave the dam, it does X, if you remove Y, putting my, council hat on, I speaking for that group in some capacity, faced with the question of, should we keep it, should we remove it? That is such a hard question because it's tied into so many things that might be impacted down the road of, how you're building your budget for the next 2 or 3 years. If you have a 30% drop because now people aren't coming to your community because this isn't here anymore, well, we've forecasted 2-3 years out for, all of the types of budget. Like, I understand well, let's be careful, we don't want to go too far into the weeds, but when this task force ends and the people coming after have to figure out those things, that as much clarity or as much of the lifting that we can do here will make, council's job that much easier, which is not going to be easy by any stretch, but will help down the line.
Yes, no. First of all, I don't know that it's our responsibility to make the council's job easier. You guys have to work on this one, But I think the more important thing is if you established, and I'm not sure where we start or where we end, but you established that it's going to have a negative impact on some of the businesses along the river if the river is lower, or if the river is faster, or if the river is more narrow and, that's really all you have to worry about. I mean, in terms of quantifying, is it going to be positive, is it going to be negative, and an order of magnitude of how much it's going to be.
But if you say negative, and your negative might be 5%, and I can live with 5%, I'm okay. So I don't want the word negative to suddenly scare people of,
well, I don't know. It would be okay, I'm not going to use the word negative, we'll just say a decrease. And I'm sure we could speculate whether it's a 5% or a 50% impact, I guess the thing is, I think it's important that we look into these things, and I think these are all good ideas. I just, as you use the term, I don't want to get caught in the weeds, so we're sitting here talking about minutia for, meeting after meeting, and then we're trying to allocate $50,000 for a consultant, and I like consultants, but I think sometimes it's more than we need. And I think, or maybe our request for what we want them to do needs to be defined so it's not too, what do you want to say, specific in terms of getting into all the minutia, I don't know. I mean, maybe you guys don't agree with me, but I think we got to be careful we don't get caught in this spiral. I mean, and there's some things that I would say that we need to, maybe we can comment on at the next meeting. I mean, quite honestly, how much revenue in general from the paddle boats annually, that's internal to the partnership. What difference does that make? Actually, it's enough to make the paddle boats run, but it's not supporting, Potawatomi Park. The revenue is not that great. So I'm not sure if that's I just want to make sure that we don't get too hung up on those things. You understand what I'm saying? I'm not articulating very well, and I apologize, but
I agree.
The concept is important. We just don't need to get caught down in the weeds too far. Otherwise, we're going to be looking at this stuff forever. That's okay. You don't agree. Just, I guess we can raise our objections to that or our comments in terms of how to hone it down for the next meeting. All right? And this is a good presentation, by the way. I didn't see it. I didn't have a chance to look at this before tonight, so I apologize for that, but there you go. Next. Who's our next? Let's get back to my agenda.
Me and Paul.
All right. And Paul's not here, so it's your thing.
So what we tried to do was not to answer specific topics per se, or items. There's a draft that
Can I interrupt for a second?
Oh, sure.
I'm not sure what's up there, but
Is there a way?
talking about the review of the Army Corps of Engineer reports on the river. That was their assignment. Review that and bring any salient and important issues before us. So, go ahead.
Is there a way to bring up a report on the screen, or is that not possible? Well, it was one of the attachments. It's labeled Dam Task Force Options and Facts. I don't think that the audience has it. Nope, not that one.
No?
No, it's not there. Okay. What we tried to do was to focus first and foremost on a format that would to put the information that's gathered by the various subcommittees into a format that would be easy for the public to understand as well as the council. And so on the left-hand side of a spreadsheet, if you would, we started listing some of the topics that we thought were critical. And these were just examples. This was not meant to be definitive. This was, this is really Paul and I just putting down what we thought. It's not supported by any studies or whatever. So on the left-hand side was water level. So Brian, to your point, right? And then the three columns next to that were, well, if we take out the dam per the Corps of Engineers report, what's the impact on water level? And what do we know? The second column was, is there an alternative to taking out the dam altogether? Some kind of modification, some kind of whatever, without defining what that is, but just saying, what does the water level have to do with that? Will it change, if you do a certain kind of structure, can the water level be held at Potawatomi Park for the riverboats, et cetera? The third column was, if we just don't do anything, let the whole situation stay exactly the way it is, then what's the impact there? Well, of course, with water level, if we leave it the way it is, that's what we got. And so the idea is for this group and the various subcommittees to go and identify first what all the topics were. So both from questions that we've had, et cetera, so that, another question is fish migration. Another question or a topic is the water quality. Another topic might be costs, et cetera, operating costs, et cetera. And there's probably 40 or 50 topics that are critical ones. And then have the various subcommittees fill out to the best of their ability, and if it comes down to saying we don't really know that, it probably would take a professional engineering firm, or there's differences of opinion on this particular thing. We just list what those are. And so one of the things that bothered me a lot about the Corps report is every time I read it, I saw something different. If you read it in one place, it says the water level is not going to change. And you read it in another place, it says, yes, it will, but, it didn't have the metadata to support what exactly was going to happen. I thought that we thought that doing this kind of a format would give us a simple way to look and see exactly, because there's a lot of rumors flying around too as to what's going on. There was a meeting up in South Elgin a couple weeks ago that talked about how all the zip lines were coming into St. Charles. Where that came from, I have no idea, but that this would give a format for reporting from the various subcommittees so that both the public and this group and council would have something to look at and quickly reference. So don't question the verbiage that I have here. That was just put to make it somewhat realistic, so that you could understand what the kinds of content that Paul and I thought would be useful.
Okay.
Anyway.
So I guess the question is, where do you go from here?
Well, what I was hoping would happen is that tonight that we could say that this format or something similar would be a way to consolidate all the various subcommittee information. And so if this group felt that that was a good way to look at it, that then we could proceed and start gathering the topics and therefore the answers from what Conrad has done, what Brian and Ryan have done, et cetera, and start layering that in. And then it would give us, if we had all that, then we'd have a completed sheet or a semi-completed sheet at our next meeting, and we could say yay or nay, or I don't like the answer on this one. What do you mean? It's not clear to me, or what about this topic? You didn't include this one, et cetera. Does So I think you did something similar to this, Brian, didn't you?
Well, I took what you initially had presented, kind of structural thinking at the first meeting, and then, expanded that out, and then gave it subtopics. Then we sort of divided into our subcommittees, and some of those got broken out. But I could kind of help to organize a table like that. It gets hard, right, because you've got such a giant table that it's not necessarily great for this format, that maybe if we could read it separately and then, each have a column.
But again, to Jim's point, though, what I was hoping to do here is that it would force quick answers, and not that there are quick answers, but at least to consolidate it, because if you went on paragraph after paragraph, and if we had 500 topics, nobody's going to read 500 topics. If it's 50 maybe, or 30 maybe, and if it just gives, generally speaking, water level has an impact on paddle wheel boats, has an impact on power boating, has an impact on canoeists, in certain areas, et cetera, and that's the answer, without going back into digging into the weeds, as Jim said, as to how deep that would be. Does that make sense?
Well, let me ask you this. Aren't we kind of doing that? I mean, the report's doing that somewhat. I mean, you have three categories here. Full replacement or removal, alternative replacement, and maintain current the status quo. I don't know that we know what kind of alternatives we would even anticipate or have if, so I'm not sure we need that. I think we need more, I guess I would say, the full removal and that full removal. That's really in between there, we can always get to that another time, but now.
I don't think you have to define what the alternative is at this point. It's just that there are ways to improve fish migration even if the dam stays in place. I mean, if some kind of structure stays in place. There are ways to hold the water level to the north without leaving the dam, the current dam in place. There are ways so I think those three alternatives are important for the discussion.
But I mean, how can we discuss the alternative replacement dam structure without knowing what structure we're talking about and how it's going to happen, and what it's going to do, and how high it will be and how high it won't be, and how it will affect as we've talked about the hydrology and all those things. Because there may be a number of alternatives, but unless we know which alternative we're talking about and the answer to those questions, we're just kind of tossing it out there.
I would agree with you. I think that leaving that really vague is an issue. I also think that this sounds more like a final product to the city council. This does not seem like a way for the individual subcommittees to go about their business and be able to delve deeply into their own questions. This seems like a way to summarize our findings to the committee. I personally would prefer not to use this.
Mike, do you have any comments?
No, I would agree. I think that, just like Jim and Conrad said, I don't want to limit the subcommittees to dive deeper. I know we're going to report on the recreation component, but I think there's a certain point that, we can go far enough. But back to Jim's point, I think we look at it from a macro perspective and we identify something that is a red flag or we want more information, then we can go into that. The hydrology report, back to what Brian said, that may answer a question for Brian and I as it relates to water levels and the types of crafts that can navigate that. So I think having more free-flowing committee autonomy allows you to dive as deep as you feel you need to based on what you're trying to research. That would be my feedback.
Yeah, and this should we say, format might be a good way to, when we get toward the end, to kind of capsulize everything we've done, give a good summary for the city council or whoever wants to read it. But it might be too early to get into it now. I mean, I think let's face it, every topic we hit, and we can have a subcommittee and other subcommittees, another topic. It's all going to basically come down to with a dam, without a dam. That's simple. We have it, we remove it. And I don't know, we need to,
Yeah, that's the point where I disagree with you, but, because I think there are alternatives that go halfway, meet certain criteria, you know, from the core reports like fish migration, et cetera, that aren't necessarily taking out the dam, aren't necessarily leaving the dam as is, that there's ways in between that other cities have done, and there are studies that would support that. And I'm not saying that's the answer. I mean, there's costs involved with all those things, and if it comes down to somebody saying, you know, this alternative is great, but it's just too costly. There's no way that if it's, Brian talks about the city budget and all the pressure it's under, that's true. But if you say, and just say that, you know, that we like this, but, and we agree that this is a possibility, but we just can't afford it right now.
I think there might be a little bit of precision of language, and so there's the dam, but there's also the impoundment, right? So the impoundment is the water that is retained, and so there are ways to have an impoundment without having a dam, and so especially a lot of the environmental issues, it's impoundment or no impoundment. And some of the other things as far as flushing sediments through, right, it's impoundment or no impoundment versus dam, no dam. And I think some of the things John are talking about are sort of dam alternatives that might maintain impoundment.
that makes sense.
If I may add something, I think to John's point, the one under safety, I think is important. I think the Illinois Department of Natural Resources had a modification of the dam that would keep the water level the same, but make sure that the roll, so you're not caught in the roll, you can modify it. I think that, I mean, that's an alternative that would, I think they would pay 60% of it. It's something to consider. I don't know. I mean, it's out there, but.
Well, where do you want to go from here?
Well, I don't know where you want to go with it. I mean, this was what Paul and I came back with as a way to try and understand the issues involved with the core report, which is kind of what we thought our subcommittee was to deal with.
Well, I mean, I think you've covered it fairly well with regard to, but the core doesn't cover, does the core cover alternative proposals also?
Yes, it does talk about it.
So maybe it'd be good to list what those alternatives are. That would help me, I'd understand what, you know.
Yeah, we could do that.
What they're referring to. And the left side, I mean, is fine, I like that. Because it recites or summarizes the report somewhat. That was where I was looking for, what I was looking for in this.
Well, if you want to proceed along those lines that you just talked about, then I would suggest that we asked the members of the task force to submit a list of what the topics are. What are the main, you know, not 500, but 25, 50, whatever they are, so that we at least identify the left-hand side of that kind of report. And then for those pieces, some of those are going to be filled in by Conrad's report, by other reports. Other ones we can say, well, you know, we don't know the answer, or we don't know the impact of this one without further study or whatever, and that's an okay answer for now. But at least the public has a way to see, you know, what the various topics are and what we think, to the best of our ability, what we think the response or, you know, comments are.
I guess that would make sense.
And then we come back at next month and we list those out and start, you know, the ones that haven't been filled in by Conrad's report or other reports, then we either as a group or assign them and say, all right, Brian, you and Brian get together, and here's 4 that kind of fit in that area that you were talking about, or, and Mike on recreation, you know, here, can you help on these 10 topics or 7 topics or whatever?
Well, I mean, I guess what I'm thinking is if we have whatever number of topics, hopefully not 50, more than I'm looking
I know.
for. Let's say 10 or 15. I'd like to know what the Army Corps report says about those.
Right.
That's all. We don't want to come out with a definitive or a dispositive answer saying this will do that or not. It just says the Army Corps suggests that, whatever. You know?
Yeah, and it should, I mean, we can reference the page number, if you would, of the
That's good.
Corps report and say on page 14, this is the Corps' response relative to sediment, you know. And whether that's supported by data or not, we can't verify, We don't have it, but it's on page 14 of the Army Corps report, is the way.
That sounds good to me. Let's go with that.
Okay.
So, sorry, so are we submitting the topics that our subcommittees want to investigate, and then you're going to provide the answer from the Army Corps of Engineers report, and that's what we're gonna go with?
No.
Not an answer. They're gonna provide the comment or whatever the Army Corps of Engineers report addressed, they've addressed that issue.
Okay.
It's not an answer, it's just, I was hoping I wasn't looking, how long is the report?
Their report?
Yeah.
I don't know, 117 pages, I think. Does that sound about right? 120?
Okay.
Well, the real need is in the appendix.
What?
Questions are answered in the appendix C.
Yeah, we would have,
Model the whole water level, that's.
yeah, we'd have to reference both the appendix and the main report, and just say, you know, relative to water topic, here's the pages where they reference what the water topic.
But again, this is for your subcommittee to answer, what did the Corps say on these issues? So
Yes.
this is going to be retitled with coming from your subcommittee.
Yes.
And not from the whole task force.
Yes.
And then we will still be able to go out and do our own independent work.
Yes.
That's what I'm looking for, a summary of what the report says. Okay? Next, recreation.
All right, perfect. So I'm told that I can share a screen from up there. So I'm going to start with a little bit of just education, and it's going to move into what we're working on, and hopefully it all kind of makes sense. And so the first thing is we just want to kind of clarify terms that we're going to be using here. And so when we talk about the river, we can talk about flow. And so flow of the river is measured as a volume per time. And so the typical measure of that is a cubic foot per second. So a cubic foot is a box that's 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot.
Can I stop you for a sec?
Yes.
Can everybody hear okay? Nope.
Okay, so I can come in a little closer. How's that? Is that a little better? Perfect. Okay, so a cubic foot is a box that is 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot. It is about 7.5 gallons, and it weighs about 62 pounds. And so a cubic foot per second, imagine I've got 2 buckets from Home Depot, right? One's full, one's half full, and I pour them out over 1 second. That is a flow of 1 cubic foot per second. And so typically, if you want to know how the dam or the river is flowing, right now it's a little above 2,000, I believe. And so the way that kind of anybody can look that up at any time would be to look up the USGS, so United States Geological Survey, the South Elgin Gauge. And so we'll have a link on our website, but you can come here and at any time, in real time, you can see how much the river's flowing. So flow is a volume per time, and that's directly correlated to river height. And so one way that they measure it is in feet, but on the website, we can come down and we can put it in discharge into cubic feet per second. And if we do that, we can see that right now we are at 2,100. And so that's just important because the river changes over time. And so a lot of times when we get modeled data from these studies, they'll show kind of an average. And so as recreational users, we don't go and paddle on an average river, right? We paddle on a day-to-day river. So it's just important to look at this and sort of understand that it changes over time. And if we go back for a full year, we can see that right now it's actually higher now than it was for just about any point in the last year. So the blue data here is the last year of data. The gray is a median, so median for all years. And so the thing to look at is that this median, it travels over time, right? So in the summertime, especially August, September, the river is much lower than it is right now, kind of on average, on median. And so sometimes that gets down, this median is below 500. And so the statement that the Army Corps has provided hydrology data, they have, but they have provided it at not recreationally meaningful flow stages, right? So for us, recreationally meaningful would be probably about 1,000, right? Because we look at this chart here, this 1,000 starts at about May, and then sometimes it gets as low as about 500. So we'd like to see data at about 1,000 and 500 in addition to what they show, which are kind of an extreme flood stage, an extreme drought stage, and 2,000, which again, 2,000 is what we have right now, which is fantastic water, but for most of the summer, we don't necessarily expect to see that. The other thing to look at is we go to just a map, right? So the thing that we're talking about today is not this, right? This is the dam. It's a very small thing. But if we zoom out and look at what's actually impacted, so from the St. Charles Dam, the official impoundment runs for 3.9 miles, which ends right about here on the river before it bends back on itself. And so we've got nearly 4 miles of river that is impounded, and so that's water that is impacted by the dam, but it's not impacted the same way. It's sort of the things are sloped, and so at the dam, the impact is much greater than it is back here. And then past here, we actually have another 3.6 miles that run all the way back to South Elgin. So in St. Charles, we're sort of unique in that we have a very large segment of impounded water, but we also have a very large segment of unimpounded sort of river as it would be without the dam. Similarly, on the bottom side, we have about a mile of unimpounded river below the dam, and then about a mile of impounded river that runs to Geneva. So that's not water that's impacted by our dam, but recreationally, that is water that we can still access from St. Charles. And so it's still within our recreational scope. We're going to count it. And so, again, right, it's not just the dam. We've got about 9.5 miles of water that we're looking at. So when we're looking at recreation too, it's a very diverse piece of water. And so we can't just treat it as one thing. And so when we're looking at recreation, we are sort of segmenting the river into the various river sections we have and then looking at what kinds of users can utilize those different segments. So, for example, the first kind of mile, it's almost like a pond. There's very little current. And so, again, if we're going to define terms, current is a velocity, it's a speed. So it's how fast is the water moving. And so at a given flow, in a given section of river, you'll have a certain speed. And if you choke that river down to be narrower or shallower, that speed of the river will go up. You can imagine if I've got a hose and I put my thumb over the end of the hose, right, I reduce the area that the water is flowing and it flows out faster. And so I can make the water shoot much faster. And that's where the flow is the exact same on the back side of the dam as it is the front side of the dam. It just moves much faster after the dam, partially because it just drops 8 feet, however far it drops, but partially because if we look at what the river looks like just after the dam, sorry about that, it gets much skinnier and shallower, right? So it forces that water into a tighter channel, and that's where the water, it moves faster. So the current is higher over on this side, but the flow is identical here to here. And it's just important to think about that. When we look at how we are organizing data, the things that Mike and I are doing in recreation are actually relatively easy, right? Because we think about what the users are, we can kind of quantify or categorize those users. What are they using? Are they on pedal boats? Are they on canoes, kayaks, power boats, whatever? And then we can ask those users, well, what are your requirements? So regardless of what the river is now, what are your requirements as far as how deep does the water need to be for you to operate? How wide does the water need to be for you to operate? So, for example, I've got a 20-foot kayak, and it's got a turning radius of about 40 feet. So I need a river that's close to 80 feet wide just so I can know that I can safely turn around and operate that sort of a thing. We can ask, what's the maximum current you can operate in? So on a kayak, maybe you can operate against 3 miles an hour of current. But if I'm on a pedal boat like the Park District has, maybe I can only handle a current of 1 mile per hour. And so by asking all those questions for the various users, we can categorize them and, number one, quantify where they can operate now, but then with the additional hydrology data, we can project where they'd be able to operate in a future river. I'm trying to think what else we have. So similar to that, we've thought about fishing. We don't really know much about fishing, so we're going to need to contact a subject matter expert on that just to see what types of fishing users we currently have, what is currently available, and then in the projected river, what they could do. And then on top of that, we've got a list of access points. And so for a further presentation, we can put that together as far as what the current access points are and how those might be affected.
The Fabulous Fox people have a map with all the access points identified, so it should be easy.
It's fairly easy, but they are missing a few things. So, for example, they are missing your Langham Park put in. They're missing a couple
Yeah, that's being put on. It depends on which document you get. If you get the current one, I think it's on there.
Okay.
No.
Good to know.
Yeah.
And they also miss, I think, the bluffs. I can't remember exactly what it's called, just north of Redgate, there's kind of that dog park. And so that's another thing, right? We're not just considering boats, but we're also considering what are the sort of adjacent uses. So things like that dog park, right? So it's not a place where you could put in a kayak because you've got to walk down a really big hill, but folks are there with their dogs, and their dogs go out in the river and swim. And so looking at, well, that's a use I didn't consider. Similarly, just north, so I got my map up, just north of the Redgate, you've got the sandbar, and it's literally just a big sandbar, right? But there's a lot of recreational users that use that for wading, they play volleyball, whatever else. And so looking at not just what we think of for traditional recreation, but just kind of holistically, who are all the people touching? What we would like to do as a committee, as far as the further needs, are kind of already mentioned it, right? We need more hydrology data at the other flow stages that are more recreationally relevant. And what we'd also like to do is we would like to count. So literally we would put out folks that would go to these different access points. We've got about 5 main access points, and they would just count users, count and quantify users. And so we would not only get data for how many there are, what craft they're on, but also some demographic data, because I'm guessing there are probably some interesting demographic trends as far as who uses various river segments and who might be impacted if their recreation types are taken away. To do that nominally, we were estimating about $5,000 might cover that, as far as it's mostly a manpower thing just to pay folks to go out and literally do the counting for 8-10 hours at 5 different sites. That would cover a couple different days, and obviously we wouldn't just go out and spend money. We would put together a proposal and then try to leverage whatever resources, because I'm guessing either the city and or the park district, they already have some sort of resources for counting people.
Yeah, the Forest Preserve may have some of that data for you. You know, 'cause they're promoting Kane County as a recreational destination, et cetera. And they must have some data that would support some of that. How detailed it is, I don't know. But
yeah, and that's why, well, our thought was that we want to do it all in one day, right? We want to cover every access point and cover it for an entire day, so we don't have fragmented information, because some of the information is really easy to get. So like the big paddle wheel boats, right? We can pull numbers, and they can tell you exactly how many people row those paddle wheel boats, and we know how many did the rentals. But really, without doing a whole study of the whole river all at once, I don't know that you're going to get, you know, great usable data. You'll just kind of get that fragmented. And then there's also just kind of parts that I don't think people see. So for example, we have that big 3.5 miles of unimpounded water already, right? Who uses that? So we've heard that recreational use would improve for some folks. That's great. Let's look and see who's already using that water and how they might use more water, or, you know, do folks not use it or whatever else.
So, going forward, when are you going to have this done?
When are we going to have it done? Depends how fast we get our money, right? So, I mean, ideally, this is something that we do relatively soon, because as I showed, right, there are various water stages. And so presumably you'd want to measure this at various water stages, because even now with our current river, right now with our 2,000 CFS, this is fantastic water. Basically all users that are current recreational users can use this water right now. As we get down later in the summer down to 1,000 CFS, the recreational use does drop, and this is just from observation, right? So the river starts to get low, and so some of the power boaters that can get up as far as this on the river, when you get down to 1,000, they can kind of get to Redgate maybe a little further. When you get down to about 500, some of them stop running. So for example, the paddle wheel boat at 500 CFS, I think it has to turn around somewhere around here. And so if you're looking for relevant recreational data, you really have to capture it at various river stages. Because those different users, they access the river differently.
do you think the Corps has the hydrology metadata that, I mean, they produced the map, so there's got to be data behind it
I
someplace.
bet they have it. I think the difficult thing is it's pretty hard to read, because if you look at somewhere like Geneva, right, Geneva is really small, so they can give you like a really nice zoomed-in map. As I just told you, we've got 9.5 miles, and so if you take a map and you zoom it out this big to print it on a PDF and a report, you can't get good data, right? Because it's just, we can't see the river width enough. And
But
so
they
what we-
must have data back behind it someplace to be able to draw the graphic.
Yep, so we just need to see the data directly. In the printed materials that they put in the report, it's just not adequate for what we need. And it doesn't even have complete coverage, because I think it runs up about this high, and then it misses this whole segment here. And so we would need to just see that, so we're not denying that it exists, we're just saying we don't have access to it in a format that is usable.
So what can you have for us next meeting?
What can we have for your next meeting? So for next meeting, we can probably commit to finish filling out our tables. So I'm a kayaker, Mike comes from a family of canoeists, and so we have down the human-powered things. What we'll need help categorizing the power boaters, and we will need a little bit of help with the fishing. Mike identified some internal resources he has within Park District, and we've probably got a lot of knowledgeable people behind us, right? So if we've got folks that are interested in helping to fill out these tables, because this is available on the website, right? So this was pulled directly off of our agenda today. If folks want to look at that and they want to help us fill that out, they can, submit comments or afterwards catch me and we can get that filled out. And then next meeting, we can also come with kind of our projected plan for how we would do that count if we get approval to go forward and, spend an approximate amount of money, just so that we know how to scope it.
All right. That sounds good. We'll look forward to that. Thank you. Give me a chance to get the rest of your seat. Okay, I think we have the Carpentersville Dam removal project down there, just to know the status, or,
Before we move on.
I don't know.
So we've got three subcommittees that have pretty significant asks for resources and further studies. I agree that there needs to be more scoping on overall questions, but my concern is that if we spend 6 months discussing what should be the analysis that we ask these folks to do, what resources we need, we're going to be into the holiday season, and then we're supposed to get this report out by March. Well, that is my fear. So I'm just wondering, what can we set as a timetable for when we're going to send out RFP or RFIs?
Well, we need to, first, I think we need to provide, at least for the city, the Park District, and perhaps me as chairman, your precise asks.
Okay, so is that next month we do the exact asks, and then the month after that we can...
Before then, you can be doing between now and the next meeting.
So in the next 2 months, we could be going out and getting these resources.
I don't care if we get it next month.
Okay, great.
So, I mean, I have no intention of extending this process any longer than it has to be. Okay, so I don't want to be doing that in 6 months. But it's okay. We might be, I'm not promising. Does anyone here have the status of the Carpentersville dam removal? Holly, do you know?
Holly does.
Oops, Jesus, what hit that again?
Well, I was gonna say is that the Carpentersville Dam, it's all on the Incline Forester website. So please access the correct information off the website. Obviously, the project was first approved in 2015 with an initiative with the IDNR in regards to dam removal, along with other causeways. The final approval has been recent. They just went out for bid in May. According to the bid document, the final completion or approval of that will be in June, and they show completion in November of '24. But they have a lot of other documents and information about that project, the reason for why they would work with that project on their website.
So, okay, very good. So they won't be doing, I'll be right with you. Okay. They won't be doing the dam removal for some time.
They're gonna start this summer, once they get approved.
But they've only gone out for requests at this point?
They've already received the bid.
Oh, I'm
The
sorry.
bids have been received in May, and on the bid doc, they are looking for final approval on the bid, June 11th.
Okay, very good, thank you. What was it, Steve? Well, I'm not doing public comment.
I'm on the county board,
Okay.
and there was a meeting this morning where it was discussed.
Okay, come on up then.
I'm Bill Roth on the county board for...
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Are you sure?
Could you write your name and
I
address?
can.
That would be great. Anybody who speaks tonight on the public comment, we have a little pad there, but if you can just make sure you write your name and your address. Thank you.
Okay. I'm Bill Roth. I'm on the county board for District 12, which is the east side of St. Charles, so east of the river, all the way up to Stearns. This morning was the Forest Reserve's executive committee. The original bid that they submitted to the state was rejected. There were some qualifications, so they're trying to work with the state to get requalified. So they are hoping to get approval this summer. They approved this morning an engineering expense because the state requires, since they're paying for the majority of, that you have an engineer on site 75% of the time. So we just approved that this morning. So they are hoping to get it approved this summer, working through the things and hopefully get it done. They did start years ago. They reported on it last May. Some of the requirements has changed. One of the original requirements was that they had to excavate all the silt because it was considered toxic. And that's when the state has changed because it's saving them $1 million. And that's, some concerns that have been brought up. We're now doing 9 dams. Are we going to find out in 10 years that we're passing it all downstream?
So they're not removing silt?
They are not.
That's not...
That was removed as a requirement because the state is saying, oh, it's fine. Well, it saves them $1 million a dam is what I heard.
Yeah.
So the plan is, they have done part, I think the original agreement with the state was like $3.5 million. We still have 2.9 to spend on it. So that's the latest as of 9 o'clock this morning.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so now, city comments by this point on the board. It's time for public comment. We have people that would like to make comment? Good. Remember when you come up, please again, sign in, if you would, please, and keep your comments concise and short.
Okay.
My name is Patrice Brissell. I live in Geneva. It's my second task force meeting that I've come to. I wanted to talk specifically about the economic impact. As you say, there are a lot of subjective measurements in there. How do you measure the beauty of the river? How do you measure someone's enjoyment being in nature? What might be a more objective method of handling this is to find out what are the costs of keeping the dam. You're talking maintenance costs, you're talking maybe extra insurance costs. Those are very quantifiable. You might find that at that point when you do determine what the costs are versus the undefined and much higher costs of dam removal, it would be an easier decision, economically speaking. To your point that this is not a binary decision, I agree with you completely. You need to determine what problem you're trying to solve with dam removal. I haven't really heard that yet, of what problem are you trying to solve. Comments that, not from this board, but from the public, that the dam somehow causes poor water quality. I don't stipulate that. Absent from your discussion is the important action that the impoundments serve in taking urbanized pollution and through the deep-rooted plant material actually cleaning the river, so improving the water quality. It's an important factor that I'm not hearing discussed here at all. Also, the Kane County just recently passed a climate initiative and trying to reduce our carbon footprint. They want it to be neutral by 2050. What I see also absent in this discussion is the important contribution that the wetlands serve in carbon dioxide as a food source for those wetlands, and it reduces our carbon footprint. So that is made possible by the dam and the impoundments, and elimination of that would be in direct contravention of the initiative that the board has just passed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next. What?
I was writing seriously when you,
Yes.
it's a different subject on the dam removal. How will you handle the unfunded costs that have not been contemplated, included in the Army Corps' estimate? So you've got things like moving your stormwater pipes to now the new boundaries of the river. That's pretty expensive. You're going to have to do wetland restoration because removal of the dam and the impoundment will destroy wetlands. All those have to be restored per environmental regulations. Removing the dam doesn't clean the water. It sends your pollutants downstream. What I had just heard that the state has decided is very concerning because in the case of Geneva, anyway, we've had decades of hazardous waste disposal into that river that are now sitting underneath a layer of silt. And when you remove that dam, if you remove the dam, you're going to scour that all up, and you're going to send those pollutants down to Aurora, who gets their drinking water from it. The fact that the state says everything's okay without checking, I'd hate to see another Love Canal. I'd never hate to see another Flint, Michigan. I'd hate to be responsible for poisoning the poor people of Aurora. Now I'm done.
Thank you.
My name is Richard Street. I live in St. Charles. I do have a question that I have no expertise in, but it wasn't mentioned tonight, I don't think, but I can't hear good back there. The question is there going to be an impact on the aquifers? I know for a fact there's been a couple of dam removals, other parts of the country where people literally ran out of well water. And what impact will it have on this? And from an economic perspective, can you put in a sewer to my house when that happens for free and city water? The second thing I'd like to bring up is that a neighbor of mine just caught a muskie, pretty good size. Anybody want to see a picture I have on my phone? Can a muskie really survive in 2 feet of water in the wintertime? So I think when you're looking at, okay, we're going to save the clams, we're going to do this, why don't we look at what species are going to be damaged and which ones are going to be helped? And what's the balance with that? You know, somebody just caught a 20-pound catfish. I mean, that catfish can survive right down 4 to 6 feet of water in the wintertime, but can it survive otherwise? So these are the types of things I would say. And the other thing is, who's going to pay for, and this is part of the economic impact, once you pull the plug and drain the bathtub and all the toys are left, who's going to clean the toys up and who's going to pay for it? There's tires in that river. There's buckets. You could have a really good big flea market sale maybe. But I'm just saying that that's a cost, too, that has to be considered. Because at the meeting in South Elgin, they literally said it wasn't their problem. They weren't going to clean it up. So those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Wayne Valley. I'd like to...
Will you sign in, please?
I'd like to pass out a couple
articles here have an influence of Lowhead Dam on water quality in urban river system.
Speaking to the microphone.
Pardon me?
Speaking to the microphone.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you want to pass them out? Here, this is, here. Here's one group, and here's another group. So I just want you to take the time. One of the articles is very technical. One of the articles is very technical, but it's good reading, and I've highlighted the important parts of it. And the other one is related to the Klamath River dam removal that is happening out in southern Oregon and northern California. Very disastrous situation that has happened out there. And it'd be wise we're just trying to educate everybody here about the pros and cons of dam removal. And this will give you some information as to what may happen with the dam removal here and along the other 9 locations on the Fox River. So I'd appreciate it if you'd take the time to read it and educate yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? We're making you our last contributor, okay?
I'm the last one. Okay.
Second to last contributor.
That's okay. I'm Frank Conrad. I live in St. Charles. And I've been hearing talk. I signed it.
Okay. Thanks.
That's okay. I'm quick on that. I've been hearing the liability that the state of Illinois wants to get rid of as a big factor in the decision-making on the dams. And I was curious as to what they were meaning by that specifically, because liability comes in many forms and in many sizes, and I didn't hear anything in specifics. Do we have anything in specifically listed by the state or the IDNR regarding to the liabilities? I mean, are we talking about injury? Are we talking about property damage? Are we talking about environmental? Are we talking about loss of business? I mean, there's probably 10 or 11 different liabilities, and I haven't heard one yet. So I was just wondering if the panel has a list of the liabilities and how it's determined. And from my understanding, there's 3 forms of liability that can apply here, and I don't know which one the city would be under at that time. And I also like to know what the city has got in their risk management plan for anything going wrong with the dam, because they would be pulled in even though they don't own it. They would be brought in as a partner in any kind of litigation. It's more than likely. So just curious as to how the city's adjusted up to this point as far as budgeting and risk management, and what they've been told from the state in form of writing as far as the liability that they would be taking on. Does anybody have any answers to that?
Not yet.
So they just said you're going to have liability. They haven't told you what kind it is yet. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, they've alluded to in terms of the costs and things like some of the mention of costs, but we don't have the articulated costs yet.
Yeah, well, it's important to know because those costs could be significant in the millions and billions of dollars. So you really want to know. Okay. And they have not done that, but they have promoted the fact that they want to get rid of the liability, but they have not specified what that is. So okay, I was just curious. Thank you for letting me know.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi there.
I made him our last speaker. Is your thing really good? Is what you're going to say really good? All right, we'll make you the last speaker. Can everybody do it? Okay, you're our last quick speaker. Right? Go ahead. Sign in, please.
I just got done doing that. My name's Randy Millington. I live over on the west side. I've been traveling across the bridge for probably about 50 so years. Enjoyed the river and whatnot. My question is, why does the state feel the need to remove the dam? I've never been able to get a real good answer from anything. This is my first meeting. I've seen the sign, Save Our Dam, blah, blah, blah. My question is knowing that the dam could and did produce power, all the dams up and down the Fox River for all the years. They used it for milling, they used it for power generation. I know that there's silt that's damaged and contaminated behind the wall. I know there's a lot of things upriver. Has anybody looked into the fact that if we could extend the pool from where it's usable at current flow rate further up around there, it'd be a lot of digging and a lot of things that could be done, but then you could put adjustable gates on all the different dams up and down, create power, maintain usability, as well as be able to use some of that power to offset the cost of cleaning out the silt and getting rid of all the contaminants and maintaining the flood control project as it's kind of set out to be. So we are able to adjust the height of the flow to maintain the water levels, keep everything going, and then still be able to reduce the flow when we have high flow rates after storms coming down from Fox Lake, but still be able to maintain the enjoyment of the river. I don't know if that's ever been done or anybody's looked at it. I know that it's possible. I just don't. I'm not an engineer, so I can't do that.
There was a study not answering all of your questions, but answering at least the power one. I believe it was the city of Elgin did a feasibility study on retrofitting the dam up there and what power generation would be possible and what the ROI is. I can't remember, 15 years maybe, but there was a study about that from that city.
I was just curious if anybody's done that. So, and then who would I be able to talk to share some of my ideas here on the board?
Just talk to us.
Okay. So, I mean, is there anybody in particular I could be able to sit down with and be able to run some of those by?
Give us a chance. I think some of the things you're talking about, especially the economic interest and things like that, will be covered by the economic, but the hydrology, you were asking about that also.
Okay.
And I think you're going to cover much of that, right?
I don't know if we'll cover it. We're hoping to obtain it, right? Because it's, again, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Addressed.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, this better be good.
It's still going to be simple. I don't know if I'm worthy of,
Sure you are.
Sure you are. I care about it, and that makes it worthy.
That's fine. I'm just giving you a hard time.
Yeah. I did speak at the second meeting that you had. I was not present at the first. You may remember me.
I do.
And my wife and I moved to St. Charles because of the charm of this dam. The dam sits directly between two historic buildings, the Baker Hotel and this municipal building that we are meeting in right now. That's very unique. And from listening to all the talk that I've heard tonight, it's quite complicated. I took down notes trying to process things, where this committee might be going, what I'm feeling and everything. I think in the end, with all the subcommittee reports, that we're going to find many of the, much of the data and the feeling and the answers are going to support keeping the dam, and I think some of it's going to support removing the dam. So there we are with that kind of situation, and then kind of coming to an agreement and advising the city council on which direction we might want to go. But I can tell you that the dam is the heart of St. Charles. We have observed, living on this river, countless photos of people with it's the dam in the background, always. The river, the dam, the pool. The photographers, both visitors and residents, and certainly the Kane County professional photographers, all of the pictures, etc. All you had to do is go to the Fine Arts Show and see that the dam is St. Charles. Reminds me of something my wife's grandfather told me one time on a medical condition. He said, Rick, avoid that medical condition at all costs. And what I am here to say is I believe, in my mind, that St. Charles should avoid removing that dam at all costs. And when you say at all costs, yes, there's going to be disadvantages and advantages of both removing the dam and keeping the dam. And I, as a resident, would even be willing to pay extra my share of helping to maintain that dam. I believe the cost of removing the dam will outweigh the cost of keeping the dam. I hope I said that right and I didn't say it in reverse. This is speaking from my heart, and I care about St. Charles, and I sure care about that dam. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
An interloper.
I'm sorry?
He was the last one. That's okay.
I'll be quick. I'll be quick. So my name is Steve Bertho. I'll sign in here.
He's for sure the last one.
Sorry about that. I hate to mess up your system. I apologize.
It hurts, but I'll deal with it.
I just thought I should make a couple quick comments because I heard a couple different things that I think really all feed into the same issue, which is let's save this dam at all costs. Mr. Wildwell, you had mentioned the options that are in the Iowa Corps of putting components on the dam to get rid of the risk issue associated with the boil. Those are simple civil engineering. I'm a registered engineer, retired, but I've been for 40 years. Put a stair step in there, and you're going to beautify the sitting. You'll have a nice water flow that goes down these steps that aerates the water, that improves the quality of the water. You keep the pond, so you keep all the historical significance, all the there's so many positives about that. You know, that you had heard somebody else talking about, you know, the wetlands that are going to dry up and die off and how you're going to have to mitigate those. You have so many different risks associated with taking the dam out that you haven't even captured yet, between all the embedded hazardous waste that's in the lower layers of the silt around there, between the mitigation of property values, mitigation of shoreline. You've got wetlands that have evolved over the last 180 years since these dams were built. It just is the list of risks on taking this dam out. You got somebody who's got blinders on that's saying they're going to pay to take the dam out, but they're not talking about all the other things that are associated with that. And you know, whether you have structural issues with the retaining walls on either side, those need to be evaluated. That's a risk. You don't know if you got problems or not. We know that they're degraded. You had a registered structural engineer give you a caution on that. He doesn't know yet because he hasn't done the evaluation, but there are so many different risks and issues that are associated with taking this dam out, and the loss of the beauty and the loss of the community is huge. And so I just implore you to make sure you consider a good risk assessment of all this and realize that there are simple things that can be done to get rid of the boil and reduce your liability and make your insurance premiums go down. There are things that you can do as far as propagation of species that are, you know, there are fisheries that propagate species all over. Go down to Louisiana sometime if you want to see fisheries. So there's a lot of different ways to deal with some of the, quote, negative issues about this dam. And it's like one of the other speakers mentioned, the amount of cleanup that actually happens. You have a retention pond that's 4 miles long. That retention pond takes care of all your urbanization pollution. It takes all the stuff that drains into the pond and it washes it out and cleans it. And one of the reasons that the Fox River is so clean right now, outside of the fact that industrial pollution went away years ago, is the fact that you got these ponds that are actually, it's the ideal civil engineering retention pond. It's a long pond that's a self-flushing system. You got enough retention time for biodegradable wastes that are just part of life around here that are going to go into that pond from storm water and from wastewater management that just get dropped in there that will go through a biodegradable cycle. You got deep-rooted plants that have 180 years of evolution that handle all of this stuff in a passive, simple fashion. And you take the dam out, it all dries up. the river shrinks from 25 to 50%. All those wetlands that have evolved over 180 years are going to dry up and die. You can't just get that stuff back. You know, you have some people that are walking around saying, oh, don't worry, you know, you can just punch some little seeds in here and everything will be fine. Well, what about all the invasive stuff that grows on its own besides that? You're going to take the beauty of this city and destroy it by taking this dam out. And it's just a caution, and I hope that you know, I'm very glad that you all are looking at this, and I have confidence that you all will make good decisions. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from the Air Force? One quick question. Real quick. 4 seconds.
I'm a crane operator, and we were working on the buildings right on the south side of the river, and there was a very large beaver there. Does anybody know what happened to it? I know it has nothing to do with this.
He's under the Prairie Street Bridge.
He's still around, though? Thank you very much. I had
Saw him last week.
All right, cool, thank you.
All right. No comments, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion